Hey, Jim, it's good to see you again. Say, are you going to raise any queens this year?
You should have prepared me for that, Kim. I'm not going to raise a lot of queens, and I won't raise them by the Doolittle method, but I will probably raise a few queens just as simply as I possibly can. You see, I'm probably going to just do the technique where you lay a frame on the side, let them draw out the comb themselves. Of course, the simplest thing to do is just take the queen out and make a split, let them raise their own.
Yeah, I'm kind of going for keep it simple. I don't do any of those things. I just let the bees do what they want to do. Hello, I'm Kim Flottam.
And I'm Jim, too.
I want to welcome you today to Honeybee Obscura, where Jim and I are talking about probably the simplest way we can raise some queens if we have to raise some queens.
You are listening to Honeybee Obscura, brought to you by Growing Planet Media, the folks behind Beekeeping Today podcast. Each week on Honeybee Obscura, host Kim Flottam and Jim too explore the complexities, the beauty, the fun, and the challenges of managing honeybees in today's world in an engaging and informative discussion meant for all beekeepers, long-timers, and those just starting their journey with bees. So sit back and enjoy the next several minutes as Kim and Jim explore all things honeybees.
Kim, I wonder if you could call this technique brain-dead queen production.
Well, that would fit me pretty good.
Tell me what two old guys can do on a podcast system on a wintry, snowy, blustery day that's truly going to help someone raise queens.
I don't think a whole lot, and I haven't done much along the way of raising queens. I've always kind of taken a half step back and let the bees do what they want to do, but you mentioned one easy way. But then there was that thing about the frame on top. What was that?
Kim, there's all kind of techniques. I first of all, to you and the listeners, I am not putting myself out here as a master queen producer. Through the years, I've raised queens a lot using different techniques, but I've never tried to become a master at it. So, Kim, let's just keep this as a conversation and not as a lecture.
Okay.
But this is what happened with that frame laying sideways. One of the techniques, Allie and others have all kind of variations on a theme. You cut down cells that have eggs or young larvae in it, and then you turn those cut down cells sideways to the way they were, or vertical so that they're facing downward. And then this is critical. You give it to a bunch of young bees. It doesn't have to be pounds and pounds. It can be 2 to 3 pounds of young bees that are healthy and well-fed, and you make that the only option that they have for a queen. And they'll begin to draw cells on that for you.
Well, if you've taken all of the other opportunities away from them, you're offering some kind of control of the genetics by the frame that you're putting on top of the colony that's going to raise them, right?
That is perfect, Kim. It's like we rehearsed this. That's exactly right. I chose the bees. I chose the colony that I modified the comb with the eggs. So I had that control over it, and I gave them that breeding stock, more or less. So this is just as simple as it gets, other than just removing the queen and letting them decide which breeding stock to use. If I want to control anything about this process, this technique is about as easy as it gets.
Well, then you are introducing some, I'm going to say foreign genetics, some alternate genetics to that hive. That hive will not be the same as it was when that queen has been laying for a while.
Right. And to some extent, that would have happened when they replaced the queen anyway. I mean, the genetics in that colony is always waxing and waning and flexing and fixing, depending on what queen is there, and then depending on what queen she was replaced with when she had to be superseded just a short time later.
And then you get into the drones that new queen is going to mate with that you have no idea.
Yep. And you see in the wild, they're swarming like crazy. Seeley and others have said that these bees are swarming all the time. So it's just us. It's just beekeepers who want to keep that same queen in the same box for a long time. That doesn't happen anywhere except in our apiary most of the time. We have a hard time making it happen there too.
Maybe I'll have to try one of those ways this year just to see what it's like. I haven't raised a lot of queens in my life intentionally. I've always pretty much taken a half a step back and let them do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Or I'll buy one of those really expensive queens because somewhere I read somebody said that this line of bees was impervious to death or something.
Yep, made out of cast iron. They had a good attitude all the time. I know. I love queen producers. Don't get me wrong. Hey, anybody produces queens listening in, I admire you for doing it, and I want you to keep on doing it. But for the rest of us, it's a lot of tedious work to do that, to pull that off.
And if it doesn't work, you can kiss that colony goodbye.
Well, you got to take it apart. You're right. So if you made a 2 or 3 pound split, 5 frame split, let them raise their own queen, didn't work, you're going to have half the bees left, and they're going to be old and not worth much. But you tried. And tell yourself this, every colony doesn't requeen itself in the wild. It's always hit and missed. For a queen to be replaced can only be described as major surgery on that colony.
Yeah. Well, I think my beekeeping philosophy has evolved after or over 50 years back to letting the bees do what they're going to do because they probably are smarter at it than I am.
Yep, they are to some degree. They oftentimes are playing a different game than we're playing. They're looking at excessive swarming, smaller population sizes, probably feistier, more stingy bees. We're looking at bees with a good attitude, nice personality, make crazy amounts of honey, and never want to swarm. So there's multiple game plans going on here. The thing about this whole queen thing that's changed, I don't want to walk down memory lane every time you and I talk. But when I first started this, it was a different world. Queens were $1.75, $2.50. And this is laughable. I've said it before. I've written about it. If you were dumb enough to kill that queen introducing her, you could write them and say, she died. And within reason, they'd send you another one. And they're not going to send you 10. But they'd send you another one. It's not going to happen now. I mean, that queens cost too much. They're too hard to get. The responsibility for requeening is too great. In my opinion, the basic fundamentals of queen management have changed. So if you've got a queen that's just okay, and the rest of the colony is in pretty good shape, anymore, I may just want to stay with that queen. Whereas 15, 20, 30 years ago, I would have thought, boy, she's not up to the job. I'm going to replace her. But to take the chance to get her replaced now, to deal with varroa, to control small hive beetles, and take on this objective case of replacing just an okay queen, I want to reconsider that now. That's the things that have changed.
Better Bee is pleased to sponsor today's episode of Honeybee Obscura podcast. For over 40 years, Better Bee has supplied beekeepers across the country with the tools, equipment, and knowledge needed to succeed. Because many Better Bee employees are beekeepers themselves, they understand your needs and challenges and are better prepared to answer your beekeeping questions. From their colorful catalog to their support of beekeeper educational activities, including this podcast, Better Bee truly lives up to their tagline of beekeepers serving beekeepers. See for yourself at betterbee.com.
I've been to enough commercial queen operations over the years to know that the queen that they're going to send you is worth the money they're asking.
Yep.
Probably.
Yep.
From the perspective of what it costs to produce her.
Yep.
Is she going to be worth the money they're asking for that queen in terms of how much better that colony is going to be than if I had not replaced her? And I don't have that answer.
I don't know how you answer it, because it's not just replacing that. What if I'm making a split? If I'm making a divide, maybe the queen is fine in the colony. I just want more colonies. And the big thing about letting them raise your own queen, my dad always said, let them raise their own. They know more about it than I do. And you've said that. It's going to be about 50 days. It's going to be about 52 to 53 days from the day that you make that decision until the day there's new workers coming from that queen. So 50 days from now, 1st of February, February, March, sometime first week of April, second week of April or so, I'd finally be having worker bees coming from that new queen. So when I'm making the decision to let them raise their own queen, I need to look ahead about 2 months to see where that colony's season is going to be then. Will they have enough time to prepare for winter? Will they have enough time to get honey stores laid by? If I make them take 55 days off, 50 days, whatever it is, to install this new queen.
Well, I'm sitting here with a calendar in my head, looking at this and thinking, one of the precepts of varroa control now is to have good control in medium to late fall last year.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm going to do that, why wouldn't I be requeening then so that I have a good queen going into winter so my 50 days of getting a new queen is going to be last summer, not this spring.
Right.
That makes sense?
It does. Yep, there's fall requeening. That's a topic for a different time, but basically, any time the bees are flying freely and are collecting and working, and there's no winter cluster, you can work with the queen within reason. I've gotten off the subject to some extent. So have you. You lured me off the subject.
Yeah, I did.
The thing, it worked out well. I had fun doing it because it was so easy. I left out a frame. How many times do I do this? How many times before I stop leaving out a frame, saying, I'll come back tomorrow and replace this frame? Well, I didn't. And, of course, by the time I got back 5 days later, there was burr comb there in that slot where that frame was. And in that nice, brilliant white burr comb that the bees had just drawn was eggs and the very first instar larvae. So I replaced the frame. I picked up 4 spent queen cages, and I laid that piece of burr comb on its side, and then I put a shim around it to give me some space, and I just left it because I knew the colony was queenless. Now, that's important. I knew the colony was queenless when I removed the queen from that. So I used that piece of burr comb on that queenless colony laying sideways, and they've just within the next day, you could tell which ones they had picked out. Of the several hundred that was there, they had picked out 8 or 9 of them, and they made some ugly-looking, scruffy queen cells, but they were queen cells. And then I was able to use those to make a queen or 2 out of it. I'm just playing, Kim. This is not commercial beekeeping. This is not a recommended procedure. This is an old guy beekeeper who needs more to do out in his own bee yard with an opportunity, taking advantage of it just to watch bee biology at work. And I did make a queen using that burr comb with those fresh eggs in it. The thing is, it's so fragile. That comb is so delicate. Crushes so easily. It's so hard to handle. So it's easier just to handle the whole piece than it is to try to use a cell punch system or something.
Well, it's snowing. It's 18 degrees out, and it's going to be snowing for the next 24 hours, I'm told. So I guess I'm not going to have to worry about this for a little bit yet.
No, you're not. But I want to aggressively say it's a very enjoyable aspect of beekeeping to raise these queens. You have a very parental feeling. Yeah, you're my offspring. I was there the day that you were just a 3-day-old larvae. You were the cutest little thing I'd ever seen. You have a real sense of being involved. And I want to tell you how this story ends. When it comes time to crush that queen's thorax a year or 2 later and replace her, you have those same feelings. I was there the day you were born. I put this yellow mark on your thorax. I know you well. It's a pretty heartless person that can say, okay, good job, you're done. So it's as hard ending it as it was starting it. But if I have, just from the easy standpoint of raising your own queens and tinkering around with them, it's an enjoyable aspect of it. Now, if you're serious about it, you're making splits, you're requeening, you're trying to control swarming, and you're going to pay the big bucks for a big queen, that's a different game. We're not talking about that game.
Yeah, well, at least not today. And I'm going to end this with one quick thought here is that queen with the yellow spot, I'd have put her in the nuke in the back of the bee yard and kept her around for a while just in case.
Yep.
And that way, just in case that new queen that I was going to replace her with doesn't work, I've got her in the background, and I know she does.
Yeah, but you're talking like a retiree now. You're trying to give her some useful post-retirement job. I know what you're doing. It's a good idea. I rarely kill a queen.
Yeah.
I rarely.
Well, I got to run, so I will catch you next time.
I want to talk more about this with you, and I want to encourage others to try it. Hey, thanks for everybody for listening. Give this a shot, this whole concept of queen production. Start reading now.
Yeah.
Get ready. That's it. I'm done.
See you next time.
All right. Bye-bye.